Right now, in this moment, you believe you're choosing to watch this. You believe that out of everything you could have done with this particular slice of your life, you selected this. You reached for a device, or a screen found you, and something in you, some faculty of judgment or curiosity or preference, made a decision. You chose. The choice felt real. The choice felt like you. That feeling, the feeling of authorship over your own actions, the sense that you are the origin of what you do rather than merely the vessel through which events pass, is perhaps the most intimate and the most persistent experience of human life. It underlies everything. It underlies moral responsibility, because we only blame people for what they chose to do. It underlies personal identity, because the self is in large part the thing that makes choices. It underlies meaning, because a life that you authored is different from a life that simply happened to you. It underlies love, because being chosen by someone who could have chosen otherwise means something that being selected by a mechanism does not. Now, what if the physics says the choice was never real? Not approximately. Not in some philosophical edge case that doesn't apply to ordinary life. What if the laws of nature, written into the fabric of the universe at its most fundamental level, are such that every action you have ever taken, every word you have ever spoken, every thought you have ever had, was the only thing that could have happened, given everything that came before it? What if the feeling of choosing is a story your brain tells you after the fact, a narrative imposed on events that were determined long before you existed? This is not a thought experiment invented to disturb you. This is the implication that serious physicists and neuroscientists and philosophers have been extracting from the best science we have for more than 3 centuries. And the fact that it remains terrifying, that it has not been domesticated into something comfortable by the passage of time and the weight of evidence, tells you something important about how deeply the belief in free will is woven into what it means to be a person. If you're new here, welcome. This is the kind of territory we explore on this channel. Settle in. Subscribe if you want to keep going into these places. Get comfortable, because we're going to follow this question all the way down through physics and neuroscience and philosophy, and we're going to be honest about what we find at the bottom. Tonight, we are not going to pretend this is anything other than what it is. One of the most disturbing conclusions that rational inquiry has ever produced. Before we reach for the physics, let us spend a moment with the experience itself, because the experience is the thing that makes this hard. You wake up in the morning and you decide whether to get out of bed immediately or lie for another few minutes. You decide what to eat. You decide which route to take to work. You decide how to respond when a colleague says something that irritates you. You decide whether to tell the truth in a difficult conversation or to soften it into something more comfortable. You decide what to think about when your mind is quiet. Hundreds of decisions, small and large, made throughout every day, each one feeling like it belongs to you. Each one feeling like it could have gone differently. This feeling is so fundamental, so continuous, so deeply embedded in the texture of moment-to-moment experience, that questioning it feels almost incoherent. It feels like questioning whether you are real, because in a very deep sense, you are your choices. The person you are is the sum of what you have decided to do and not do, think and not think, pursue and abandon. Strip away the choices, and what is left? The philosopher and neuroscientist Sam Harris has described free will as the feeling that we could have done otherwise, that given an identical situation, identical brain state, identical history, identical physics, we could have reached a different decision. And it is this specific claim that you could have done otherwise in a situation identical to the actual situation that the physics challenges most directly. Because the physics, as we will see, says no. Given exactly the same initial conditions, the same laws of nature produce the same outcome. Every time, without exception, the idea that you could have done otherwise, given everything exactly as it was, is not supported by any serious physical theory of how the universe works. It is a story, and it may be the most important story we tell ourselves. Let's go back to where this story started to crack. The crisis for free will in the modern scientific era begins with remarkable precision in the 17th century with Isaac Newton and the publication of his Principia Mathematica in 1687. Newton's achievement was extraordinary. He took the motion of objects, everything from falling apples to orbiting moons to the trajectories of cannon fire, and showed that all of it could be described by a small set of mathematical equations. Force equals mass times acceleration. The gravitational force between two bodies is proportional to their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. From these laws, combined with knowledge of the initial positions and velocities of all objects, you could calculate the future state of any mechanical system with arbitrary precision. The mathematics was exact. The predictions were verified to extraordinary accuracy. The implication was stunning. If the universe is a mechanical system, governed by mathematical laws that connect each state to the next without gaps or randomness, then the future of the universe is, in principle, completely determined by its past. Given the positions and velocities of every particle in existence at any moment, the laws of physics determine, without ambiguity, the positions and velocities of every particle at every subsequent moment. The universe is a machine, and machines do not make choices. This vision was articulated with crystalline clarity by the French mathematician Pierre-Simon Laplace in 1814, more than a century after Newton. Laplace imagined a hypothetical intellect, now called Laplace's demon, that knew the precise position and velocity of every particle in the universe at a given moment, and that could apply the laws of physics to calculate the entire future trajectory of every particle. For such an intellect, Laplace wrote, nothing would be uncertain. The future, like the past, would be present before its eyes. You're made of particles. Your brain is made of particles. The neurons that fire and produce your thoughts, your decisions, your sense of authorship are made of particles. If those particles obey Newton's laws, and at the scale of neurons they very nearly do, then the state of your brain at every moment is determined by the state of your brain at every previous moment, which is determined by the state of your brain before that, all the way back to before you were born, before your parents were born, before the Earth existed, before the solar system formed, before the first stars lit up in a universe 3 minutes old. The decision you made this morning was encoded in the state of the universe 14 billion years ago. Not because anyone or anything planned it, because the laws of physics are deterministic, meaning each state leads uniquely to the next, and the chain of causation connecting the Big Bang to your breakfast choice is unbroken. Laplace's insight was not presented as an argument against free will. It was presented as a description of the power of scientific knowledge. But the implication was inescapable. If the universe is deterministic, free will, in the sense of being able to have done otherwise given exactly the same conditions, is impossible. The laws of physics leave no room for it. This is the determinism problem, and it is as old as the scientific revolution itself. Every physicist and philosopher who came after Newton inherited it. And for more than 2 centuries before quantum mechanics entered the picture, the best physics available said the universe was a Laplacian machine, grinding forward according to fixed laws from a fixed initial state, with no genuine alternatives at any point in its history. For most of the history after Newton, the argument against free will based on determinism was easy to resist with a simple maneuver. Physics applies to billiard balls and planets, one might say. The mind is something different. Consciousness, thought, decision, these are not the kinds of things that Newton's equations were designed to describe. There is a gap between the physical and the mental, and in that gap, free will might live. This is the intuition behind mind-body dualism, the philosophical position most famously associated with René Descartes, who argued that the mind and the body are fundamentally different kinds of substances. The body is extended, material, subject to mechanical laws. The mind is thinking, immaterial, not subject to mechanical laws. And it is the mind that chooses, that deliberates, that exercises will. The gap between them protects free will from the grip of Newtonian determinism. The problem is that this gap has been closing for 3.5 centuries, and in the 21st century, it is barely a crack. The evidence that the mind is what the brain does, that thought is a physical process, that consciousness is a product of neural activity rather than an immaterial substance, has accumulated to the point where the vast majority of neuroscientists, physicists, and philosophers of mind consider strict Cartesian dualism to be untenable as a scientific position. We know that brain damage changes personality. We know that drugs and chemicals that interact with specific neurotransmitter systems change thoughts, moods, and decisions in predictable ways. We know that electrical stimulation of specific brain regions produces specific experiences, specific movements, specific desires. We know that epileptic seizures, which are electrical storms in the brain, can produce complex automatic behaviors that the person performing them has no memory of and experiences no authorship over. We know that deep brain stimulation can treat depression and compulsion by changing the firing patterns of specific neurons. Every one of these facts points in the same direction. The brain is a physical system. Mental events are physical events. Decisions are the output of neural processes that are, in principle, subject to the same physical laws as everything else in the universe. And if that is true, then the gap between billiard balls and brains is a gap of complexity, not a gap of kind. The billiard ball is a simple physical system. The brain is an extraordinarily complex one. But both are physical. Both are, in principle, subject to deterministic laws. And if the billiard ball has no free will, neither does the brain. This argument does not require certainty about every detail of neuroscience. It requires only the principle, which modern science has established with very high confidence, that the mind is what the physical brain does. Once you accept that principle, the determinism problem extends from the planetary scale to the neuronal scale. The gap that was supposed to protect free will has closed. When quantum mechanics arrived in the 1920s and revealed that the universe at the subatomic level was not deterministic in the Newtonian sense, many people hoped that this was the escape route. If a universe contains genuine randomness, if quantum events are not determined by prior causes, then the Laplacian picture is wrong. The universe is not a machine grinding along a fixed track. There is genuine indeterminacy at the bottom, and perhaps in that indeterminacy, free will finds its home. This hope is understandable, but it rests on a confusion between two things that are importantly different: indeterminism and freedom. Quantum mechanics does introduce genuine randomness into the world. Radioactive atoms decay at random moments. Photons pass through half-silvered mirrors or don't in ways that cannot, even in principle, be predicted. The position of an electron cannot be known with arbitrary precision simultaneously with its momentum. These are not failures of our instruments or our knowledge. They are fundamental features of how the universe works at the quantum scale. The universe is not deterministic in the Newtonian sense, but random is not the same as free. If your decision to stay in bed this morning was caused by a quantum event in your neurons, a random firing that went one way rather than another, you did not choose it. Randomness was responsible, not you. A choice driven by randomness is not meaningfully free. It is not an expression of your values, or your reasoning, or your character. It is an accident with a biological address. Free will, in the sense that matters for moral responsibility and human dignity, requires that your decisions flow from you, from your reasons, your values, your deliberation, not from prior causes outside you, which is what determinism implies, not from random quantum noise, which is what indeterminism implies, but from some third thing, some genuine capacity for self-origination, for being the author of your actions in a way that neither determinism nor randomness accommodates. And here's the problem. Those are the only two options physics offers. Either causes determine effects, in which case your decision was determined by prior causes, or effects are not fully determined by prior causes, in which case there is genuine randomness. Determinism or indeterminism. Every physical system falls into one of these categories, or some combination of them. There is no third option that physics recognizes, no category of self-originating causation that is neither determined nor random. This is the logical pincer that closes on free will when you take the physics seriously. And it closes regardless of which version of physics you use. Newtonian mechanics gives you a deterministic universe with no room for freedom. Quantum mechanics gives you a non-deterministic universe in which randomness replaces determination, but randomness is not freedom. Either way, the thing that the common-sense picture of free will requires, genuine self-originating choice, has no home in the physical description of the universe. This is the argument that the philosopher Galen Strawson calls the basic argument, and in its most compact form it goes like this. To be truly morally responsible for what you do, you must be truly responsible for who you are. To be truly responsible for who you are, you must have caused yourself to be the way you are. But you cannot be the cause of your own character and dispositions without an infinite regress, without having made a prior choice to become the kind of person who would make the choice, and a choice before that, going back forever. The regress is impossible. Therefore, true moral responsibility is impossible. The argument is not conclusive against every possible definition of free will. Compatibilists, as we will discuss, have responses to it, but it establishes the fundamental difficulty, the kind of free will that most people mean when they feel free, the kind that justifies punishment and praise, the kind that makes the difference between a life you lived and a life that happened to you. That kind is deeply in tension with the physical picture of how the world works. If the physics is abstract, the neuroscience is visceral. And the most visceral piece of neuroscience ever conducted on the question of free will is an experiment performed in the 1980s by a neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet. Libet was interested in the timing of conscious decisions. He designed an elegant and unsettling experiment. Participants sat in a chair and were asked to flex their wrist at a moment of their own choosing. They watched a clock with a fast-moving hand and were asked to note the position of the hand at the moment they first felt the urge or the intention to move. Meanwhile, electroencephalography electrodes measured electrical activity in their brains. Before the experiment, the intuitive expectation was clear. A person decides to move. The decision causes the brain to prepare the movement. Then the movement happens. Decision first, then brain activity, then action. What Libet found was something different. The brain showed a characteristic electrical signal, now called the readiness potential or Bereitschafts potential, that began rising approximately 500 milliseconds before the movement. This was not surprising. What was surprising was that the conscious intention, the moment when participants reported first feeling the urge to move, occurred approximately 200 milliseconds before the movement. The readiness potential, the unconscious brain preparation, began approximately 300 milliseconds before the conscious intention. The unconscious brain process was preparing the movement before the person consciously decided to make it. The decision, in other words, appeared to be a consequence of prior unconscious neural activity rather than the cause of it. The conscious experience of deciding, the feeling of authorship, the sense of intending to move, arrived after the process that would produce the movement had already begun. What felt like a choice might have been, in some precise neurological sense, a report on a process that had already been set in motion by mechanisms operating below the threshold of awareness. Libet himself was careful about the interpretation. He noted that participants retained what he called a veto power. The conscious experience of the urge could, it appeared, be suppressed in the last moments before the movement occurred. The person could choose not to follow through on an urge that had already been unconsciously initiated. Libet believed this preserved a residual role for free will, even if not the initiating role we intuitively assume it plays. Critics of Libet's interpretation have raised many objections over the decades since. The readiness potential may not be what it appears. Some researchers have argued that it is a statistical artifact rather than a precursor to individual decisions. Others have argued that the experiment only applies to simple, arbitrary movements like wrist flexions and tells us nothing about complex, deliberative decisions involving reasons and values. Still others have argued that the timing of conscious intention is notoriously difficult to report accurately, and that the 200 millisecond figure may be unreliable. These are legitimate objections, and the science has continued to develop. More recent experiments, using more sophisticated brain imaging and more complex decision tasks, have produced mixed results. Some confirm and extend Libet's findings. Others complicate them. But here is what no subsequent experiment has overturned. The general principle that unconscious brain processes precede and shape conscious experience, including the experience of deciding. That the conscious self, whatever it is not sitting upstream of the neural processes that generate its decisions, surveying options from a position of independence and issuing instructions. That consciousness, including the consciousness of intending, is downstream of neural processes that it did not initiate and of which it was unaware. This is the neuroscientific version of the same conclusion the physics reaches by a different route. What feels like the origin of action is not the origin of action. The origin is deeper, earlier, and operating by mechanisms that consciousness does not control. There's a response to the determinism argument that has occurred to many thoughtful people, and it goes something like this. Even if the universe is deterministic, the complexity of the brain is so extraordinary that its behavior cannot be predicted in practice. The number of neurons, approximately 86 billion, the number of synaptic connections between them, on the order of 100 trillion, the intricate electrochemical dynamics that govern their firing, all of this creates a system so complex that even a Laplacian demon would struggle to compute its evolution. Maybe determinism is true in principle, but irrelevant in practice. Maybe the unpredictability of complex systems is enough to preserve something functionally equivalent to free will. This response invokes chaos theory, the branch of mathematics that studies systems that are deterministic, but whose behavior is extraordinarily sensitive to initial conditions. A chaotic system is one in which tiny differences in the starting state grow exponentially over time, producing dramatically different outcomes. The classic example is the butterfly effect, the idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil might, through a long chain of atmospheric interactions, influence whether a tornado forms in Texas weeks later. The weather is in principle deterministic. Every molecule of air follows physical laws. But the sensitivity of the system to initial conditions makes long-range prediction practically impossible. The brain, by many accounts, has chaotic properties. Its dynamics are sensitive to initial conditions in ways that make its behavior unpredictable over any significant time horizon. Does this unpredictability save free will? Unfortunately, no. And the reason is subtle but important. Chaos does not introduce genuine randomness. A chaotic system is still deterministic. The unpredictability is a consequence of our inability to measure initial conditions with sufficient precision, not a consequence of any genuine indeterminacy in the system. Given perfect knowledge of the initial state, a chaotic system's future is as determined as any other deterministic system's future. The butterfly effect makes prediction practically impossible, but doesn't change the fact that the outcome was already fixed by the initial conditions. For free will, this means that the unpredictability of the brain offers no genuine escape from determinism. The decisions your brain makes may be practically unpredictable to everyone around you, and perhaps even to yourself, but they're still, in the deterministic picture, the inevitable consequence of the physical state of your brain, which is the inevitable consequence of the physical state that preceded it, which goes all the way back to conditions that existed before you were born. Unpredictability is not the same as freedom. A coin toss is unpredictable and not free. A weather system is unpredictable and not free. Unpredictability tells you about the limits of your ability to compute outcomes. It tells you nothing about whether there are genuine alternatives available at each moment. And there's a deeper problem. Even if chaos made the brain's behavior genuinely random at some level, we are back to the earlier problem. Random is not free. The decision that results from a chaotic amplification of a quantum fluctuation in your neurons is not your decision in any meaningful sense. It is a physical event that happened in the space your body occupies. Calling it your choice because it happened in your brain is like calling an earthquake your choice because it happened in your neighborhood. The complexity and unpredictability of the brain, though real and important for many purposes, do not rescue free will from the pincer of determinism and randomness. They make the problem more interesting. They do not solve it. At this point, if you are paying close attention, you may be forming an objection. You may be thinking, this argument assumes a specific, extremely demanding definition of free will. Maybe that definition is the wrong one. Maybe the question is not whether we could have done otherwise in a universe with different physical laws, but whether our actions flow from our own reasoning and values rather than from external compulsion. And by that definition, free will might survive determinism perfectly well. This is the compatibilist position, and it has been the dominant view in academic philosophy for decades. Compatibilism holds that free will, properly understood, is compatible with determinism. The key move is to redefine free will not as the ability to have done otherwise in a deterministically identical universe, but as the ability to act in accordance with one's own desires, values, and deliberative processes, free from external coercion. On this definition, you acted freely when you walked into a restaurant and chose what to eat, even if your choice was the inevitable product of your taste preferences, your mood, the options available, and the neural processes implementing all of that, because your choice flowed from your own internal states rather than from someone holding a gun to your head. You were unfree when you chose something because someone threatened you, because in that case your action was driven by external compulsion rather than your own desires. The difference between free and unfree on the compatibilist account is not about determinism versus indeterminism. It is about the source of the causal chain leading to the action. Compatibilism is philosophically sophisticated and practically important. Much of our legal system, our moral practices, and our interpersonal relationships implicitly rest on a compatibilist notion of freedom and responsibility. We do distinguish between actions that flow from a person's own character and reasoning and actions that result from external compulsion or from impairment. These distinctions matter, and compatibilism can capture them. But compatibilism has a problem, and it is a problem that the philosopher Galen Strawson and others have pressed with considerable force. Compatibilism changes the subject. The free will that compatibilism defends is not the free will that most people mean when they feel free. The free will that feels important, that underlies the deepest intuitions about moral responsibility and the meaning of a life, is not just freedom from external coercion. It is the sense of genuine authorship, the sense that the decision was made by you in a way that goes deeper than simply being caused by your internal states, because those internal states were themselves caused by prior states that you did not choose. When you feel guilty about something you did, the guilt is not just because your action was caused by your internal states rather than external compulsion. The guilt is because you feel that you could have done otherwise, that there was a genuine alternative available to you at that moment, that the choice was really open. And that is precisely the thing that compatibilism concedes is not actually the case in a deterministic universe. The alternatives were not genuinely available. The choice was not really open. The outcome was fixed. Compatibilism, on this view, offers us a revised and diminished sense of freedom and asks us to call it free will. It is a reasonable consolation, but it is not the thing the word originally pointed to. And acknowledging the substitution is important because the thing it substitutes for is the thing that actually matters to most people most of the time. Beyond Libet, the neuroscience of decision-making in the decades since has produced a picture that is even more uncomfortable for the intuitive view of free will. We know now that a large proportion of mental activity is unconscious. This is not the Freudian unconscious of repressed desires and hidden conflicts, though that may be real too. This is the operational unconscious, the vast bulk of neural processing that your brain performs continuously and that never reaches awareness at all. Your brain regulates your heartbeat, your breathing, your body temperature, your immune response, without any conscious input. It processes the visual field, integrating signals from millions of photoreceptors into a coherent scene, before the result of that processing arrives in consciousness as a perception. It retrieves memories, evaluates social situations, and prepares motor responses, all before anything surfaces as a conscious thought. Research on priming, on implicit bias, on the influence of mood on judgment, on the way irrelevant environmental factors affect important decisions. All of this research paints a consistent picture. What we consciously deliberate about is a small fraction of what determines our behavior. The conscious deliberation is, in many cases, more of a commentary on what has already been decided at the unconscious level than a genuine, originating cause of the decision. Psychologists call this post hoc rationalization. When you make a decision, your conscious mind often constructs reasons for the decision after the fact. Reasons that feel like they were the causes of the decision, but are more accurately described as justifications that your narrative self imposes on a process that operated below consciousness. The reasons feel like they came before the decision, but in the neurological timeline, they often came after it. This is not a fringe hypothesis. It is supported by a substantial body of experimental work. In a classic series of experiments, psychologists showed that people's judgments and decisions could be influenced by factors they were completely unaware of and that had no logical relevance to the decision at hand. The position of an option on a list, the ambient temperature of the room, whether the experimenter handed them a warm or cold drink before the decision, whether they were hungry or full, all of these factors influenced important judgments in measurable ways, without the decision-makers having any awareness of the influence. The picture that emerges is of a decision-making system that operates largely in the dark, influenced by a multitude of factors outside consciousness, and that generates, as a kind of output, a conscious experience of having decided. The conscious experience is real. The feeling of deliberating and choosing is genuine. But the relationship between that experience and the actual causal process that produced the decision is not the relationship of cause and effect that the experience implies. The experience of choosing may be, in a precise sense, a retrospective narrative rather than a genuine event. The neurologist and author Robert Sapolsky, whose book on this subject is among the most rigorously argued treatments of the free will problem in recent years, puts it starkly. By the time you're making a decision, he argues, you are already the product of an incredibly long chain of causes. Your genes, your development, your hormones, your childhood experiences, your culture, your social context, your immediate emotional state, none of which you chose. Every factor that shapes who you are and how you respond to situations was in place before you were in a position to choose it. The person who makes the decision is already fully determined by everything that made that person who they are. This is determinism applied not at the abstract level of physics, but at the concrete level of biography and neurobiology. And it is, in some ways, more disturbing than the abstract version because it is personal. It applies not to particles, but to you. We need to go somewhere that most discussions of free will avoid because it is perhaps the most disturbing place the argument leads, and avoiding it leaves the picture incomplete. The physics of the 20th century did not just give us quantum mechanics. It gave us something else, something that operates at a different scale and carries implications that are, in their own way, as destabilizing as anything the quantum world produces. It gave us Einstein's theory of special relativity, and with it, a picture of time that should have changed everything about how we think about choice and possibility in the future. Einstein showed that time is not what it appears to be. It is not a universal river flowing at a constant rate from past to future, with all observers agreeing on which events are simultaneous and which are not. Time is relative. Different observers, moving at different velocities or sitting in different gravitational fields, measure time differently. What one observer calls now, another observer in a different state of motion will describe as already in the past or still in the future. The simultaneity of distant events is not absolute. It depends on the observer. The implication of this, worked out carefully by the mathematician Hermann Minkowski and elaborated by physicists in the decades following Einstein, is that time must be treated as a fourth dimension of a unified space-time continuum. The universe is not a three-dimensional space evolving through time. It is a four-dimensional block, a structure in which all moments, all locations, all events, past, present, and future, coexist with equal ontological status. In this picture, which physicists call eternalism or the block universe, the future does not come into existence as time passes. It already exists. It is simply a region of the four-dimensional block that your particular world line has not yet reached. Your birth, your death, every choice you will ever make, every word you will ever speak, every breath you will ever draw, all of it already exists in the block, already determinate, already fixed, laid out in four-dimensional space-time with the same permanence as a mountain range. The physicist Brian Greene has described this in terms that are useful. When you watch a movie, all the frames already exist on the film before you see them. The experience of the film unfolding feels like a sequence of events, feels like things are happening for the first time, but the entire movie is already there. The block universe suggests that our experience of time, the sense of a moving present, the sense of the future being genuinely open, is something like watching a movie and forgetting that the real was always complete. The future is not waiting to be created. It already is, including every decision you think you are yet to make. This is not speculation at the fringe of physics. The block universe is the picture of time that general relativity strongly implies, and most physicists who work on the foundations of physics take it seriously, even if they don't always dwell on its implications. The implications for free will are not ambiguous. If the future already exists in the four-dimensional block, then the choices you have not yet made are already facts. They're already there, fixed in the geometry of space-time, waiting for your world line to arrive at the moment where they occur. The choice you will make tomorrow already exists as a fact in the block. You will not be creating it when you make it. You will be reaching it. The feeling that the future is open, that your decisions are genuinely undetermined, that what you do tomorrow depends on what you choose, is, in the block universe picture, an artifact of the particular temporal perspective of beings who experience time sequentially. From inside the movie, the future feels unwritten. But from a perspective of the complete four-dimensional block, it was always already written. This does not sit comfortably. It is not supposed to. It is the physics of time pointing directly at the most cherished aspect of human experience, the experience of genuine possibility, and suggesting that it is an illusion generated by the structure of our temporal perception. If free will does not exist in the sense that most people intend, the implications extend far beyond the personal and the philosophical. They extend into the foundations of law, of justice, of how human societies organize the response to harmful behavior. Virtually every system of criminal law in the world rests, at some level, on the assumption that people who commit crimes are morally responsible for those crimes, and that moral responsibility requires that the person could have done otherwise. We punish people not merely because they did something harmful, though harm prevention matters, but because we believe they chose to do it. The punishment is understood, at least in part, as a response to their choice, as something they deserve in virtue of having decided to act as they did. This framework has ancient roots. It is embedded in religious concepts of sin and guilt and redemption. It is embedded in philosophical concepts of justice and desert. It is embedded in the everyday moral psychology of blame and praise, of admiration and contempt. When someone helps you generously, you feel gratitude not just at the help, but at the person who chose to offer it. When someone betrays you, you feel anger not just at the betrayal, but at the person who chose to commit it. The moral emotions, gratitude, resentment, indignation, admiration, all presuppose that the person at whom they are directed was genuinely the author of the action that provoked them. If determinism is true, this entire framework is built on a premise that may be false. People do harmful things because of the physical history of the universe acting through their biology, their neurochemistry, their developmental history, their circumstances. The murderer and the saint are both the inevitable products of everything that made them who they are, everything that came before them, everything that shaped their brains and their characters and their dispositions. Neither of them, in the deepest sense, chose to be who they are or to do what they do. The neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky makes this argument with particular force. He asks us to consider our intuitions about a person who commits a violent act under different circumstances. If the person has a brain tumor pressing on the frontal lobe, altering their judgment and impulse control, we feel sympathy. The tumor made them do it, we say. If the person has a genetic predisposition to aggression and impulsive behavior, we feel somewhat less sympathy, but still some. The genes are not their fault, we acknowledge. If the person had a traumatic childhood that normalized violence and failed to develop normal emotional regulation, we feel some sympathy, if perhaps less. If the person grew up in comfortable circumstances and simply chose to behave violently, we feel no sympathy. We call it evil. We call it choice. But Sapolsky presses, where exactly in this sequence did the causal chain stop being the kind of thing we excuse and become the kind of thing we blame? The tumor causes specific neurological changes. The genes cause specific neurological changes. The childhood trauma causes specific neurological changes. The comfortable upbringing with its particular experiences, its particular reinforcements, its particular emotional lessons, causes specific neurological changes. At every step, the behavior was caused by factors the person did not choose. At every step, the causal chain reaches back into conditions that preceded the person's ability to make choices. At no point does a gap appear in which genuine, uncaused free choice enters the picture. We draw the line of blame and excuse based on how visible the causal mechanism is, not based on whether a causal mechanism exists. When we can see the cause clearly, a tumor, a gene, a trauma, we excuse. When the cause is invisible or distributed across a lifetime of ordinary experience, we blame. But the cause is always there. The visibility of the cause is a fact about our knowledge, not a fact about the presence or absence of free will. This does not mean that punishment is pointless. Even in a deterministic universe, consequences affect future behavior. Punishment can deter, rehabilitate, and protect society from harm. These are legitimate and important goals of a justice system. But they are forward-looking goals concerned with producing better future outcomes, not backward-looking goals concerned with giving people what they deserve for choices they freely made. A justice system built on the forward-looking goals is very different in practice from one built on desert and blame. It focuses on rehabilitation rather than retribution. It treats harmful behavior as a problem to be solved rather than a sin to be punished. Some philosophers and legal theorists argue that this reconception of justice, while perhaps correct in principle, would have dangerous consequences in practice. If people come to believe that no one is truly responsible for anything, would the moral fabric that holds societies together unravel? Would the decrease in blame be accompanied by a decrease in the shame that deters harmful behavior? Would eliminating desert-based punishment undermine the intuitions of justice that victims of harm need to feel that wrongs have been properly addressed? These are serious concerns, and they do not have easy answers. The implications of taking the determinism argument seriously for legal and social institutions are profound and contested, and reasonable people disagree about how those implications should be navigated. But the concerns about consequences do not change what the physics and neuroscience say. The argument from consequences is a reason to be careful about how we apply the conclusion. It is not a reason to deny the conclusion. There's one more place that the advocate of free will might turn, a place that is less obviously closed than the others. And that is the hard problem of consciousness. The hard problem, as we explored in a previous investigation on this channel, is the problem of explaining why physical processes give rise to subjective experience at all. Why is there something it is like to be you? Why does the information processing in your brain not just happen mechanically and silently, without any accompanying inner experience of what it's like to think, to feel, to decide? This question remains genuinely unanswered. The gap between the third-person description of brain processes and the first-person experience of being a mind is not a gap that neuroscience has closed, or perhaps can close with its current methods. And some thinkers have argued that in this gap, free will might still find a home. The reasoning goes something like this. Consciousness is not just another physical process. It is something fundamentally different in kind from the physical processes that correlate with it. And if consciousness is something genuinely distinct from the physical, perhaps it is not subject to the deterministic or probabilistic laws that govern the physical. Perhaps conscious deliberation, genuine first-person experience of weighing reasons and making decisions, is a real causal force that operates at a different level from the neural processes that implement it. This is a form of property dualism rather than substance dualism. It does not claim that the mind is a separate substance from the body, a ghost in the machine in the Cartesian sense. It claims that consciousness, while realized in physical processes, has properties and causal powers that cannot be fully reduced to or predicted from those processes. The problem with this view, as a solution to the free will problem, is that it requires consciousness to have downward causal power over the physical processes that give rise to it. It requires that your subjective experience of deliberating can influence which neurons fire in a way that is not already determined by the prior physical state of those neurons. And this requirement runs into serious difficulties. If consciousness exerts downward causal power on the brain, it must be doing so through physical mechanisms because neurons fire or don't fire based on physical signals. But if the physical mechanisms are already sufficient to determine the neural outcome, there is no room for consciousness to add anything. If the physical mechanisms are not sufficient to determine the neural outcome, we are back to quantum indeterminacy, and random is not free. The gap at the hard problem of consciousness is real. It is genuinely unresolved. But the gap does not obviously provide the kind of causal autonomy that free will requires. Consciousness may be something that physics and neuroscience cannot currently fully explain without thereby being something that operates outside physical causation in the way the free will advocate needs. To be clear, we do not know the solution to the hard problem of consciousness. It may contain surprises. The relationship between mind and matter is one of the deepest unresolved questions in all of science. It is possible, though not established, that a full solution to the hard problem would change the picture of free will in ways we cannot currently anticipate. But this is a hope, not a result. And hoping that a currently unsolved problem will resolve in a way that saves a cherished belief is not a good epistemic position. The hard problem of consciousness is the last refuge of the free will advocate within a scientific framework, and it is a genuinely uncertain refuge. Not obviously closed, unlike the others, but not obviously open either. If you follow the argument where it leads, you arrive at a question that is not abstract at all. It is the most personal question there is. Who are you, if you're not the author of your actions? The self, as ordinarily understood, is the thing that makes choices. It is the continuous perspective that deliberates and decides and acts and takes responsibility. If the decisions were not really made, if they were the inevitable output of physical processes operating below and before consciousness, what is the self? One answer, the deflationary answer, is that the self is a story. It is a narrative that your brain constructs to make sense of its own activity, a retrospective account of events that imposes the structure of agency and authorship on a process that had neither. You are the narrator of your life, not the author of it. The feeling of being an author is part of the narrative. It is, in a sense, the most important and persistent fiction your mind tells. This is a deeply uncomfortable conclusion, and not just because it is philosophically challenging. It is uncomfortable because the narrative self, the story of being an agent with choices and values and responsibility, is the structure through which we experience meaning. We care about what happens to us and to others because we are agents engaged with outcomes that matter to us. We plan futures because we believe our actions can shape them. We feel pride and shame, gratitude and resentment because we experience ourselves and others as genuine authors of what we do. If the authorship is illusory, does the meaning dissolve? This is where many treatments of the free will problem end, in a kind of existential vertigo, and where I want to slow down and stay for a moment, because I think the vertigo, while real, may be pointing at something that is worth sitting with rather than rushing past. The philosopher Thomas Nagel made an observation that is relevant here. There is, he said, a fundamental tension between the objective view of the world, the view from nowhere, the view of science, which reveals the universe as a deterministic or probabilistic physical system with no room for authorship or moral significance, and the subjective view, the view from inside a life, which is inescapably structured around agency, choice, value, and meaning. We cannot inhabit both views simultaneously. When we step back and take the objective view, the self becomes a physical process, choices become neural events, meaning becomes a brain state. But we cannot live in the objective view. Living requires taking the subjective view, requires experiencing oneself as an agent making choices that matter. This tension is not resolvable by a clever argument. It is a permanent feature of the situation of beings who are capable of self-reflection and scientific inquiry. We are both objects in the physical universe and subjects experiencing a life, and these two modes of being make different demands and yield different pictures, and there is no synthesis that makes both pictures simultaneously coherent from a single vantage point. What the free will argument establishes is that the objective picture is real and the subjective picture diverges from it in important ways. The feeling of authorship is not a reliable guide to what is actually happening in the causal structure of the universe. But the feeling of authorship is also not simply a mistake to be eliminated. It is the structure of lived experience, and lived experience is the only mode of existence available to us. In the years since the free will debate became more prominent in public discourse, psychologists have begun to study an unsettling question. What happens to people when they stop believing in free will? Does the theoretical conclusion have practical consequences? And if so, are those consequences a reason to be cautious about spreading the conclusion? Even if it is true, the research on this question is not entirely consistent, and it needs to be interpreted carefully. But it has produced some findings that are worth examining honestly. In a series of studies conducted in the late 2000s and early 2010s, researchers Kathleen Voss and Jonathan Schooler found that participants who were induced to disbelieve in free will by reading passages of text arguing against it subsequently showed increased rates of cheating in laboratory tasks compared to control groups who had not read the passages. The researchers interpreted this as suggesting that belief in free will supports pro-social behavior, and that undermining that belief, even temporarily, can weaken the behavioral inhibitions associated with moral responsibility. Other researchers have found similar patterns. Participants who are led to disbelieve in free will show increased aggression, decreased helpfulness, and reduced willingness to engage in effortful cognitive tasks. The belief in free will appears to be motivationally functional, supporting the kinds of behaviors that depend on feeling responsible and capable of genuinely choosing. These findings have been contested. Replication studies have produced mixed results. The effect sizes in the original studies were modest. The laboratory conditions are artificial and may not generalize to how people live and behave over longer time periods. And there's a basic philosophical question about whether the induced disbelief in these experiments actually captures what it would mean to genuinely internalize the determinism argument, or whether it is a more superficial manipulation that produces superficial effects. But the concern the research raises is real and worth taking seriously. If believing in free will is functionally important for maintaining moral behavior, self-regulation, and meaningful engagement with life, then there may be a gap between what the physics says and what it is wise to act as though one believes. The truth may be practically costly in ways that create a genuine dilemma. Philosophers call this the problem of manipulated belief, or sometimes, in a different context, the problem of the noble lie. If a belief is false but beneficial, there is a tension between intellectual honesty and practical wisdom. Most philosophers resolve this tension in favor of honesty, arguing that ultimately, building a life or a society on false premises is more fragile and more corrupting than building it on true ones, even uncomfortable ones. But the tension is real, and the free will debate is one of the places where it has genuine stakes. The most nuanced response to this problem, I think, is not to choose between the truth and the beneficial belief, but to try to understand whether the belief that matters practically can be preserved without the metaphysical commitment that the physics undermines. And this is where compatibilism, for all its philosophical limitations, does real work. The sense of agency, the experience of deliberating and choosing, the practice of holding oneself and others responsible. These can all be maintained, and there are good practical reasons to maintain them, even if the metaphysical underpinning of ultimate origination has been removed. The question is not whether to feel like an agent. You will feel like an agent regardless of what you believe, because that is the structure of experience. The question is what to make of that feeling, how to interpret it, and how to integrate it with the physical picture. Here is something unexpected that some people discover when they genuinely sit with the determinism argument rather than fighting it or fleeing from it. There's a form of release in it, not a comfortable release, not the kind of release that makes everything easier or lighter. A different kind, the kind that comes from dropping a weight you have been carrying without knowing you're carrying it. If the choices you have made, the ones that fill you with regret or shame, were the inevitable outputs of everything that made you who you were at that moment, then the question of whether you should have done otherwise loses some of its grip. Not all of its grip. The regret may remain, because you're still the kind of person who cares about having acted well, and caring about that is itself part of who you are. But the particular anguish of thinking you could have done differently, had you only been a better person in that moment, softens somewhat when you understand that who you were in that moment was not under your control in the ultimate sense. This is not an excuse. It is not a license for indifference or irresponsibility. It is a different relationship to the self, one that is more compassionate and less punishing, without being less serious about the importance of acting well going forward. Because going forward, the things that shape who you are include everything you are doing right now. Learning, reflecting, building habits, cultivating values, practicing the behaviors that make you the kind of person you want to be. All of this still matters. All of it is still part of the causal chain. The fact that the causal chain is deterministic does not make the links of the chain less real. It means that the choices you make now, though they were always going to be what they are genuinely part of what produces the future. And there is something else. The same determinism that removes the ultimate ground of blame also removes the ultimate ground of pride. The achievements you're most proud of, the things about yourself that you most value, were also produced by the causal chain that produced everything else. The intelligence that allowed you to achieve something difficult was given to you by genetics and environment. The discipline that carried you through hard work was shaped by upbringing and circumstance. The values that guided you toward good ends were cultivated by culture and experience. You no more deserve credit for these than you deserve blame for your failures. This is flattening in one sense, but in another sense, it is freeing. It removes the ground for the kind of comparative self-evaluation that produces contempt for those who have less and smugness in those who have more. If everyone is the product of what made them, then the distance between any two people is a distance of fortune, of circumstances, of the particular causal chain that ran through each life. The distance is real. The differences in what people do and who they are real. But the moral significance of that distance changes when you understand that no one, ultimately, authored the initial conditions that determined which way their life would go. The philosopher Daniel Dennett, who is a compatibilist and believes that a meaningful form of free will survive determinism, nonetheless makes a point that is worth hearing in this context. He argues that understanding the causal history of one's behavior is not a reason to be passive or fatalistic, because the causal history includes the understanding itself. The person who understands the deterministic roots of their behavior is causally different from the person who does not. That understanding is part of the causal chain going forward. So engaging seriously with the determinism argument, sitting with it, being changed by it, is itself a causal intervention in the trajectory of the life. This does not say free will, but it does suggest that the encounter with the argument is not pointless even on the argument's own terms. The understanding matters, even if the understanding was always going to occur or not occur, as the physics dictated. I want to be honest about something before we reach the synthesis. Because honesty is what this kind of investigation requires, and false comfort would be a betrayal of the effort we have made to follow the argument where it leads. The terror in the title of this investigation is real, is not rhetorical, is not there to generate clicks. It is there because the conclusion we have been examining is genuinely terrifying, and softening it too much would be a disservice to what is actually at stake. The terror has a specific shape. It is not the terror of meaninglessness, exactly, though it approaches that. It is the terror of being inside a system that you did not design, cannot override, and cannot exit. The terror of the thought that every moment of what feels like choice is actually reading from script that was written before you were born. The terror of being the character in the movie who feels like the author, who experiences the lines as their own spontaneous speech, but who is, in the most fundamental sense, reciting something fixed. There's a thought experiment that some philosophers use to dramatize this. Imagine that you discover, somehow, that you have been living inside a perfect simulation. Every experience you have ever had, every choice you have ever made, every relationship you have ever formed, all of it happened inside a simulation running on a computer operated by someone else. The question is, does this discovery change anything? Does the simulation make the experiences less real? Does it make the relationships less meaningful? Does it make the choices less yours? Many people, when they think carefully about this, conclude that the simulation would not make the experiences less real. That what matters is the texture of the lived experience, not the substrate on which it runs. The love would still be love. The grief would still be grief. The achievements would still be achievements. The simulation does not change what anything is, only what it is made of underneath. Determinism is something like this. It tells you that the substrate of your experience, the physical layer underneath the story, is a causal chain that reaches back to before you existed. It does not obviously change what the experience is, but it does change what you can claim about it. It removes the claim that you are ultimately the author. It removes the claim that you could have done otherwise. It removes the ultimate ground of desert, of the sense that you earned what you have or deserve what happens to you. And these are not small things. They're the load-bearing pillars of the story we tell about why our lives have the significance they feel they have. The terror is the recognition that the load-bearing pillars rest on something that may not be there. The terror is the vertigo of seeing that the ground is not quite where we thought it was. It does not necessarily mean the building falls. People continue to live meaningful lives after encountering this argument. But the building looks different once you see what it is resting on. We have come through a great deal. We have traveled from the everyday feeling of choosing through Newton's determinism and Laplace's demon, through the quantum hope that wasn't, through Libet's experiment and its complicated legacy, through the block universe and its fixed future, through moral responsibility and the justice system, through consciousness as a possible refuge, through the psychological costs of disbelief and the strange compassion that acceptance sometimes produces. And we find ourselves at the bottom of the question where the unanswered part lies. The unanswered part is this: consciousness, the experience of deliberating, of weighing reasons, of feeling the moment of decision arrive, is real. It is not an illusion in the sense of not occurring. It occurs. The question is what it is, what role it plays, and why it exists at all. We do not know why the physical processes of the brain are accompanied by subjective experience. We do not know why it feels like something to think and to decide, rather than those processes just happening silently in the dark. This gap, the hard problem of consciousness, is genuine, and it means that the full story of what a decision is, what it involves, what it produces, is not told by the physics and neuroscience alone. This does not mean consciousness escapes determinism. It may be that the subjective experience is itself fully determined, that the feeling of deliberating is as fixed in the causal chain as everything else. The hard problem does not obviously say free will, but it does mean that the physical story is not the whole story about what is happening when a decision occurs. There is something else, something that the physical story gestures at, but does not fully capture, something that is precisely the thing it is like to be you at the moment of what feels like choice. And in that something, in the ineffable first-person reality of the experience of deciding, there may be dimensions of the event that the objective language of physics cannot reach. Not because they violate physical law, but because they're the kind of things that physics was not designed to describe. The color of a sunset is not refuted by the physics of electromagnetic wavelengths. It is something additional, something real, something that the physics accounts for without accounting for. The experience of deciding may be in an analogous position. This does not save free will. Let me be clear about that. It does not restore the ability to have done otherwise. It does not make the causal chain less deterministic. It does not reopen the genuine alternatives that the physics says were never open. But it suggests that the event of deciding, even if physically determined, may not be fully described by the physical determination. There may be an irreducibly first-person dimension to it that is not captured by saying that neurons fired in a certain pattern. What that dimension is, what it means, what it implies for responsibility and meaning and the dignity of a human life, we do not currently know. It may be the most important thing we don't know. Here is where the argument arrives, and it arrives somewhere strange. You're a physical system. The atoms that compose you obey physical laws. The neurons that generate your thoughts fire according to electrochemical gradients that are, in principle, subject to the equations of physics. The decisions that feel most deeply yours were produced by processes that were running before you were aware of them, shaped by factors that preceded you by decades or centuries or billions of years. The future you're moving toward was, in some sense, always already there in the block of space-time, waiting for your world line to arrive. And yet here you are, thinking about this. Here you are, experiencing the strange loop of a system that can model its own determinism, that can contemplate the causal chain that produced the contemplation, that can feel the weight of a conclusion that its own physics produced. You are a part of the universe that has become capable of understanding the rules that govern it, and of feeling the discomfort of what those rules imply. There is something that refuses to be fully captured by the determinism argument, and it is not free will exactly. It is the fact of consciousness itself, the fact of there being something it is like to be here, in this moment, working through this. The physics can tell you that the thought was determined. It cannot tell you why the determination is accompanied by experience. It cannot tell you why there is a witness to the deterministic process, a vantage point from which the necessity is felt, a subject for whom the question of whether the choice was free is not merely an abstract matter of causal structure, but a question that arrives with the full weight of personal stakes. The philosopher Thomas Nagel asked what it is like to be a bat. His point was that no amount of objective, third-person description of bat neurology and echolocation can capture what it is like from the inside to navigate the world by sound. There is a subjective dimension to experience that the objective description leaves out. You are inside your experience the way the bat is inside its experience. And what it is like to be you, making decisions that feel free even in the face of evidence that they are not, is not something the physics of those decisions can fully account for. This is not a rescue. It is not a loophole. The physics is still right. The determinism argument is still sound. Free will, in the ultimate sense that most people mean when they feel free, does not survive the scrutiny. But the thing that is doing the scrutinizing, the experiencing, deliberating subject that is sitting here feeling the full weight of the conclusion is something the scrutiny itself cannot fully reach. You are the universe becoming aware of its own machinery, a system complex enough to model the rules that generated it, to feel the vertigo of seeing itself as an object in a deterministic world while remaining inescapably a subject inside that world. This does not restore freedom, but it is a genuinely strange and extraordinary thing to be. The free will debate has been running for thousands of years, from Aristotle through Descartes, through Hume, through Kant, through James, through Dennett and Sapolsky and Strawson. It has not reached consensus. It will not reach consensus tonight. The argument against libertarian free will the kind most people mean when they feel free, is as strong as any argument in the history of philosophy. But the argument leaves behind a residue that it cannot explain. The conscious experience of the deliberating self. The inescapable first-person reality of the moment that feels like choice. The sense of maturing, of stakes, of consequence that accompanies every significant decision, even in the mind of someone who has read every argument for determinism and found them all sound. Perhaps that residue is simply an artifact, a shadow cast by a brain that evolved to model itself as an agent because agency was adaptive, regardless of its metaphysical accuracy. Perhaps it is evidence that the physical story is missing something important about what consciousness is and what it can do. We do not know. What we know is that you cannot step outside the experience of deciding. You cannot operate from the objective view, even if you have fully understood it. You will make choices, or what feel like choices, for the rest of your life. You will feel responsible for some of them and not others. You will care about some outcomes and not others. The machinery of agency will run regardless of whether you believe in it, because the machinery was not built by belief and is not disassembled by its absence. The most honest position, the one that takes both the physics and the phenomenology seriously, is to hold both. To know that the objective story says the choices were always going to be what they are. And to know that the subjective story, the story from inside the experience of being you, is the only story you can actually live in. Not to pretend these are the same story. Not to pretend the tension is resolved. To sit in the tension, because the tension is the accurate description of what you are. A system determined enough to follow rules it did not make. Complex enough to understand those rules. Conscious enough to feel the discomfort of understanding them. And inescapably alive to the experience of a life that can only be lived as though the choices are real, because there is no other way to live a life. The universe made something strange when it made you. It made a process that runs on determinism and experiences freedom. A machine that wonders about its own gears. And the wondering, even if determined, even if fixed in a block from the beginning, is real. It is happening, right now in you. There may not be free will, but it is remarkable. And the question of whether the remarkable thing is enough, whether the experience of agency is sufficient for a meaningful life even stripped of its metaphysical foundations, whether the love and the grief and the pride and the shame are real enough without the ultimate authorship, that question the physics cannot answer for you. It was always going to be left to you, or to whatever it is that stands where you're standing, looking out through your eyes at a universe that was determined and is still, somehow, astonishing.